Thank you for joining Spark Up Africa podcast. And on this channel, we look at the issues affecting Africa and Africans in Africa and the diaspora. There is this issue of colonialism, neocolonialism, imperialism, and there are people born in the Gen Zs may not have a clear picture of what is colonialism, what is decolonization, what is imperialism, because they were born into political democracy in Africa and not into military system. So they may not have a clear picture of what is colonialism, what is imperialism, what is decolonization. They may not have, clear picture of all this. So I want to take my time for, some students in the university now who are either students of politics, students of political science, students of history, students of even African philosophy. They may not have a clear picture of what is colonialism, what is imperialism, what is decolonization. Because just imagine people born from 1999 when Nigeria turned into a political democracy. You discover that they may not have a clear picture of what military rule is, what colonialism is. So I want to take my time to give you, some of this, a clearer picture. And it's going to help you as a student of literature, as a student of history, and equally as a student of African thought. And so I am doing a paper which is titled The State and the Society. The State and Society towards the last stage of political decolonization in Africa. And I believe that we are moving towards the last stage of total decolonization. There are few nations on earth that were not colonized. Few nations on earth that were not colonized. And I believe the African intellectuals have dwelt so much on post-colonialism and neocolonialism. And don't forget, when we talk of colonial discourse, it is a discourse of conquest. It is a discourse of domination. It is a discourse that is not a generation of the African mind. It is a generation, or it was a generation of the European mind. And we see through literature and through writings where European thinkers, European ideologues, European writers, they created stories that tend to project Africa and Africans as the underdog of this world. And don't forget, there's equally what we call slave trade, slavery, the issue of emancipation. We equally have apartheid. Apartheid was so strong in Southern Africa, where Europeans, indigenized themselves, took over power and economy, and subjugated the Africans in Africa. And if you look at right now, there is this march in South Africa where they tend to push out Africans out of South Africa. But the problem of Africa is not Africa. The problem of Africans is not Africans. The problem of Africans in South Africa is the Europeans who took over political and economic power. In as much as in 1993 or thereabout, South Africa got its independence and became a republic. But don't forget, the economic power of South Africa is still in the hands of few Europeans who control the economy. They control 70% of the wealth of South Africa. 70% of the wealth is not in the hands of the blacks. It is in the hands of the white minority. And it's unfortunate that the black South Africans are blaming black Africans in their country for their woes. It's quite unfortunate. It is, for me, a misplaced priority. And should they go the route of Zimbabwe? No. But, when Nelson Mandela came out of prison over 26 or 27 years in prison, he should have negotiated the economic liberation of South Africa. But he did not do that. He equally negotiated the political independence of South Africa. Yes, the Europeans gave them the power. And a time may likely come that even the minority Europeans might take over the reins of power again. So they are controlling the political power and equally the economic power basis of the country. Now, that is by the way. So we have the story, the issue of slave trade or slavery, where Africans were taken from Africa. And in many instances, there were African chiefs and African kings that were implicated in this business of slavery. They contributed in selling their people, in selling their lands. They contributed. The African monarchy is not in all parts, but there are stories of African monarchies equally contributing in this trade because it brought them so much wealth. And there was that concentration of wealth among the political class, the traditional political elite in Africa, the consolidated power, the feudals who trade in human beings, and the political elite. They join hands together in engaging in this illicit trade. Now, when we talk of the passage, the transatlantic movement of Africans, and don't forget, when we talk about slavery, it did not only start with the Europeans. The Arabs, the Arabs were engaged in this slavery generations ago through the Sahara Desert. They move Africans from East Africa and even part of West Africa to places or to Arab nations as slaves. And so the history of slavery in Africa is not just of the colonial slavery that is like 500 years ago or 700. We have stories of Arabs engaging in serious shipping of Africans from Africa to Arab nations to work as slaves. So that phase ended with the abolition of slavery in many countries. And even in America, where most of the slaves were taken to the Americas, the American Civil War is equally, slavery is equally part of it. If you read the Black literatures, the Caribbean literatures, you see these instances where after the dissolution of slavery, the Europeans, in 1885, changed their tactics. Instead of taking Africans to America and to other parts of Europe and the world as slaves, why not come to Africa and dominate and take over the land itself? So the focus shifted from human beings to natural resources. So they moved into Africa, partitioned Africa, and started the colonization process of Africa. We have different approaches to colonialism in Africa. The French, their approach is quite different from the British, because France and United Kingdom, they are the major or dominant colonizers of the 20th century. They are the dominant colonizers. We have Spain and other, Belgium and others, Belgium in Congo, but France and United Kingdom are major colonizers. Now, when they invaded Africa, let me start with the French process. The French, their own process is the total destruction of culture, total destruction of the culture of the people on ground, replacing their culture, identity, everything with the French system. It was a kind of direct colonialism, like classical kind of colonialism, where you destroy the identity, the language, the culture. Culture is the total way of life of a people. So the focus is the destruction of what makes you who you are, total eradication of your identity. So they ended up, creating what Fanon called, is it white marks? It's like the total destruction of the identity of the people, the total destruction of their language. So the emphasis is to replace you as a black with a white man inside a black skin. So it is a white man living in a black skin. And Paris was the center of this thought. So, and that is why, till date, colonialism in the French territory is a bit worse. The effect is damning till date. Because if you go to Algeria, you see where Fanon, Fanon did his philosophy and writing. The decolonization process was so severe because it was an effort to destroy their humanity, to destroy their identity, to destroy who they are. And if you look at writers like Leopold Sédar Senghor, who later became the president of of is it Senegal? You see that he has to introduce what he called negritude. Not only him, but with other Leon Damas and others, they created a movement called negritude. And negritude is an attempt by Black Africans to reassert their humanity, reassert their culture, reassert their identity, to reassert themselves. Because over the years of colonial interference in the French-speaking West Africa and Africa, the emphasis was the total destruction of Black identity. Since they can't kill you, they can't destroy your life, they wanted to eradicate your past. The memory of your existence, they tried to eradicate it. So every artifact, everything that makes you who you are, they went after it. Look at it. Every home you go to, every house you go to, the way the house is arranged, the way the bookshelf is arranged, everything is deliberate. If you go to a house and everything is scattered, that is the manifestation of the inner identity of the people. Every home you go to, it is organized based on the inner identity of the people that occupy that space. Every home you go to, everywhere you go, the way buildings are, the way structures are put in place, the way people arrange their space, it is a manifestation of their inner self. And that is why if you go to a house, maybe as a visitor, and you change the position of things in that house, when the occupants come back, they will start asking, where is my pencil? Where is my pen? Where is my book? They will not be comfortable, because everything that occupies a space deliberately. And that is why if people go to market and buy specific things and return home and place them at a specific space. As a Nigerian, for instance, living in the UK, during Christmas, in my place of work, I see people bringing chocolate everywhere. Chocolate everywhere, chocolate. I think it means nothing to me. I see cats everywhere. They mean nothing to me. I see flowers, people bringing flowers. Don't give me flower. They mean nothing to me. Flowers occupy no space in my space. Give me book. Give me books. I will appreciate and value them more than flowers. Give me books. I will appreciate and value them more than flowers. Give me gadgets. I will appreciate and value them more than chocolate. So, but there are people that when you give them the flower, they value it more than book. Now, and the position where things are kept are equally indication of the value that people place on those things. And so, when you come to a space and you see people wearing a specific kind of cloth, you see people eating a specific kind of food, you see people, having or producing artifacts of bronze, of iron, blacksmiths, wood carvers, having drums, a kind of occupying a space in their lives. You don't look at those things as primitive and as useless. You have to understand that these are part of their epistemic worldview. This is part of their life. This is part of their culture. This is part of their philosophy. And you can't look at those things and displace them. When you displace those things, you are displacing something that makes them who they are, something that connects them to their history, something that connects them to their identity, something that connects them to their past. And listen to me, there can be no present without the past, and there can be no future without the present, because it is the past that brought us to the present, and it is the activities of the present that will shape the direction of the future. So, if you take a step back from my analysis, back to colonialism, colonialism is a narrative that was manufactured by the minds of the Europeans. And the truth of the matter is this: many evil emanated from the minds of the Europeans. Many evil that consumed humanity. The First World War, the Second World War, slave trade, and even conquest of many nations emanated from the minds of the Europeans. Many evil that consumed humanity emanated from the minds of the European. Many of them, I must say this, starting from slave trade. And the kind of slave trade that took place in Africa, it was the kind that has never occurred in the history of humanity. Because the history of slave trade, slavery and slave trading is not new to Africa. Virtually all societies of this world, they have in their distant past, in their distant memory, histories of slavery and slave trading. They have it. But when it comes to Africa, it occupies a space that is very traumatic, that is cataclysmic, that is unearthly. And the history of colonialism and colonial thought and discourse, it was foregrounded and grounded by European intellectuals who tend to step back into archives, into even the Bible, to enhance their vision of the otherness of the African, the denigration of Africa, the the presentation of Africa as either uncouth, uncivilized, um, the presentation of the African as infantile. And so we have stories, narratives that enforced this thought. And one of them is this novelette by um, by Joseph Conrad. Joseph Conrad wrote a book titled Heart of Darkness. Inasmuch as many European intellectuals try to interpret the novel as, the descent of man into his primitive past, it is a novel that clearly denigrated Africans, where Chinua Achebe, in his criticism or critique of the novel, identify that the novel and the writer, his view and conception of Africa is very, very, very bad. Where he presented Africa and Africans in juxtaposition with River Thames and River Congo, Africans and Africa, and Africa in juxtaposition with Europe and Europeans, or United Kingdom and the people living there. If you look at the language he used, it was a novel. When I read it in the university some 15 years ago, it was a novel that was highly lyrical. I have not seen a novel that uses that the language is highly lyrical as Heart of Darkness. His description of streets in in United Kingdom, his description of the colonialists, very romantic, very poetic. And his description of Africans around the river left to die, it was very romantic and poetic. But it was a dark poetry. It was a dark poetry. It was very, very dark poetry. The way he describes Africans left to die by River Congo, or when they move from River Thames. When I even visited River Thames recently, it was a very, very hopelessly dirty river. Nothing romantic about the water. There was nothing, absolutely nothing romantic, nothing beautiful about River Thames? I cross it around London. I cross River Thames. Nothing, absolutely nothing beautiful about the river. Nothing. Very dirty water. But how can a man describe what is his in a flowery language and what is not his in an ungodly and terrible diction? That's what I cannot explain. But you see, colonialism or colonial discourse is a discourse of the hunter, so the discourse of the lion, the hunter telling his own tales. It was in the hunted, and the hunted has no voice to voice his predicament. So, post-colonial discourse is the discourse of the hunted speaking back to the hunter. So, colonial discourse it was a discourse of the hunter, the discourse of the hunter, speaking about the hunted and the space where the hunted lives. But now we have agitation against this, continuation of colonialism in Africa. And in some countries like Kenya, the Mau Mau rebellion, where Ngugi wa Thiong'o grounded his narrative, giving, voice to that rebellion. You see Africans writing back, Africans speaking back. Chinua Achebe, a good writer, writing back to the empire, speaking against colonialism. This is the season of the hunted, speaking back, fighting back at the intellectual and cultural level. At the cultural level, because colonialism is highly a cultural destruction of a system. It is a war at cultural level, in as much as it was fought at military level first to destroy structures put in place, like the Benin Kingdom in Nigeria. In fact, it was one of the cities in the ancient world that was highly fortified. You have fences around it, but Britain came and destroyed the fence, destroy everything. Colonialism was very destructive. And there is nothing that Europe can ever do to heal the wounds of colonialism. In as much as many European countries were also colonized, but what they did to Africa was not done to them. What Roman Empire did to United Kingdom, France, and other countries that encompasses the Roman Empire, it wasn't what they did to Africa. It was horribly terrible what they did to Africa. And the looting of African ancestral artifacts in many European museums, many European libraries, you have books, you have artifacts that they stole from Africa, they took from Africa. In many European countries today, they have things that they took away from Africa, the ones we know, the ones we don't even know, ranging from gold, diamond, silver, natural resources during colonial times, books, artistic works. And these same people that took these artistic artifacts from Africa, You turn back and see they don't have culture, they don't have history, they don't have philosophy, they don't have history of intellectualism. This is nothing but double standard. So we have a season where the empire was resisted by intellectuals who came out of colonialism. Then many of these intellectuals fought alongside political leaders for the liberation of Africa. When something happened, you see, colonialism itself, it has a system of oppression. And what's the system? Number one, the destruction of the monarchical and ancestral political structures on ground and systems. They either interfere with it, they subverted it, they dominated it, they, denigrated or put it aside. They left it as a shell. Most of the kingdoms in Africa had kings and queens. So colonialism either destroyed the thrones or left the king sitting on empty thrones. They stripped them of political power. Now, that gave birth to either direct rule system or indirect rule system. In northern Nigeria, for instance, where there was lesser resistance against colonialism, the colonial powers left the thrones intact with their powers. And so they were colonizing the people through their own rulers. The rulers became the channel, the vehicle for colonization. But where they face resistance, they do their best to either destroy the throne, like Jaja for Popo, put them in exile, kill the kings or the people that resisted them, like Ame Oboni of Igalaland, or eventually they try to enter into treaties with these kings for a system of control over the people and the mineral resources. So it was a system of mineral extraction. It was Colonialism was more political, military, intellectual, and resource control than just people coming to take over a place. No, they tend to take over the political space and the economic space. When these spaces were taken over, the people became subservient. Now, we go ahead to look at the post-colonial. And when I talk about post-colonialism, I look at the post as a phase and not just theories and thoughts and whatever, as a time frame post-independence, post-colonialism. So we are talking about a phase after colonialism. In as much as, there's so much conversation about the post in post-colonialism. I don't want to dwell on the intellectual conversation about around the post in post-colonialism, but the post I am talking about is the phase after colonialism. In Nigeria, it is 1st of October 1960. 31st of November, 31st of September 1960. Yeah, 31st of August or September. By September of 1960, Nigeria was still under colonialism. It was 1st of October 1960 that Nigeria got her independence. And that is for me, in the history of Nigeria, that begins our phase of post-colonialism. Now, the phase of post-colonialism in Nigeria lasted basically within 6-7 years. That was the phase of post-colonialism in Nigeria. Post-colonialism in Nigeria did not last more than a decade. It lasted just 6-7 years, from 1960 to 1967. That was basically the phase of post-colonialism. That was the phase. And in this phase, Nigeria and Nigerians were grappling with so many questions. So many questions. And if you read the document presented by the coup plotters of 1967, you will see that Nigeria was highly wounded by colonialism. Nigerians were not fully prepared. Nigerians, they had no clear picture of where they were going. After colonialism, what next? They failed to have this conversation. And so they missed the opportunity to have a post-colonial phase, totally post-colonial. Totally post-colonial. They failed to have this phase. From 1960 to 1967, that should have been the phase of total destruction of colonial structures in Africa, in Nigeria to be specific. But the Nigerian elite were victims of colonial traps. We are victims of colonial traps because when the colonial came to Africa, they partitioned Nigeria or many African societies into two sections, clear two sections. The ruling class and the class being ruled. So the minority Europeans occupy a space that is visible, a space that is demarcated, a space that enjoys so much wealth and affluence. And the generality of the people were left in squalor and in abject poverty. So they set this trap clearly because the colonialists enjoy the wealth of the empire. And the people existed as workers for the empire. And the country itself became their milk board. They keep on milking. If you look at the railways created in Nigeria during colonialism, it was not for the benefit of Nigerians. It was for the benefit of the colonialists. Taxation was not for the benefit of the people. It was for the benefit of the colonialists. Education, it wasn't for the benefit of the people. If education was for the benefit of the people, education in Nigeria would have been reformed. The same colonial structure is still maintained till date. When we talk about post-colonialism, we are talking about a system where people look at the mistakes of the colonialists, remove all the roadblocks they planted, and transform society. Visionaries. Was it not in Singapore, this South Africa, Singapore, that their president wrote a book, one of their presidents, how he moved the country from a third world country to a first world country. Now, so this is a phase of highly intellectualism. Look at United States, for instance. They fought their war of independence. And the moment they got their independence from the United Kingdom, they started the phase of post-colonialism. And in this phase, It demands you removing all the roadblocks colonialists put in place. Colonialists, number one, when they come to any society, they divide the society across lines. These lines are still in place in Nigeria to date. Cultural lines, ethnic lines, religious lines, they were put in place by the colonialists. They were not removed. Now, in 1963, Nigeria became a republic with a republican constitution. Eventually, Nigerians who took over power from the Europeans could not transform their society before the military interregnum, before the military took over power, and then leading to civil war from 1960, 67 to 1970. So from 1960 to 1970, that could have been the time, that decade, Nigerian intellectuals, Nigerian political leaders, that could have been the time of proper decolonization, proper destruction of colonial structures, proper transformation of society. But then they moved into colonial spaces and began to enjoy the benefits the colonialists were enjoying. And when the colonialists saw that the traps they set in place before they left, these people were not wise enough to remove them. They continue in the trajectory they set, the pattern they set, the society, the pattern they set, the division of society between the state and society. When they see that these people continue in that trajectory, they return back in the phase we call new colonial phase, where the colonialists who left discovered that these people maintain the structure and architecture we put in place, so they returned back in other ways and started recolonization again. And this time, it wasn't the physical colonialism, but economic colonization. Economic colonization. That is where you begin to see IMF, World Bank begin to put their hands in Nigerian politics, destroying Nigeria from within. You have things like SAP during IBB. They begin to come back. Look at it. The face of post-colonial in every society, when colonialists leave, they will monitor you to see if you can remove the traps they set in place. If they notice that you fail to remove it, they come back in another way. Today, United Kingdom and United States, in fact, United States has overtaken United Kingdom in many ways. Why? Because they were able to discover the traps set for them and remove many of them. Colonialism works with structures. And it is when society identifies the structure, especially the division line between the state and society, until you are able to remove that line, society cannot advance, because that was the line put in place by colonialism. In South Africa today, the line is still there. The line put in place by apartheid is still there. The line put in place by apartheid is still there in South Africa. That is why today they are fighting blacks as the cause of their wars in South Africa. So it becomes imperative to understand that when we talk about post-colonialism, it is a system, it is a season where the colonized discover. And if you read many literatures and studies by African intellectuals, they map out strategies of decolonization. But the political elite merely step into the abandoned shoes of the colonialists and maintain the trajectory. That clear division between the state and the people and society was maintained to date in Nigeria. As it is now, you can't reach out to your governor in Nigeria. As I am now, I can't I can't write a mail to my governor. It's impossible. Even local government chairman, you can't access them. You can't access your president. You can't access ministers. You can't access your senators. You can't access House of Reps. You can't access governors. You can't access the state. You can't access as a citizen. I can't access my president. So the line between the state and society is still visible to date. Recently, as a student in the United States Kingdom here, they discover a time capsule in Old Town Hall in Middlesbrough. So we were doing a research, a documentary on the time capsule. Do you know that I wrote a mail to the office of the mayor of Middlesbrough? Mayor of Middlesbrough. They responded to my letter and we set up appointment. We took cameras, went to the office of the mayor, fixed the camera on him, and interviewed the mayor of Middlesbrough as an international student. So can I, as a student in Kogi State University, say I will write a mail to the governor of Kogi State, and they will answer, they will respond? It's impossible. That's what we're talking about. Those structures put in place were not removed. The barriers put in place were not removed by Africans, by Nigerian leaders of the post-colonial phase. And from 1970, we entered the phase of proper neocolonialism in Africa and in Nigeria, to be specific, till date. Now the hooks of neocolonialism has been swallowed so deep by Nigeria that to vomit it out is impossible. It will take proper decolonization to remove the lines between the state and the people. And that is the line that Europeans have successfully removed, that has made their society to advance. And many African leaders come to European countries and we don't know what they learn. So I will stop here. This is part one of the state and society towards the last stage of political decolonization in Africa.